First of all, I just want to say thank you for making this documentary. I initially contacted you guys just because I was like, there's no good documentaries about Chicago house or Detroit techno, and it's how do I find out more information about it? And I went online and was Googling it, and I was like, oh wait, somebody is making a documentary, and it looks really good. And I guess it was great to see you guys give your presentation beforehand because of like, I could see a lot of parallels between like the resiliency of you guys as filmmakers and like the subjects of your documentary, that, you know, you're doing it all on your own, right? It's like independent, like you have your own company, just like they had their own record labels. And do you see other parallels between like what you guys are doing as artists and like the subjects in the documentary?
I'll answer that. The credibility, like, you know, over time we've had the, you know, we got all of our kind of access through this community that we're a part of. But even though we had access, we still didn't have confirmation that what we were doing was going to be good. So a lot of times people, you know, just like a DJ, they would say, yeah, we know you shoot films, but we just don't know how well your film is going to be or the story you're telling. And so, you know, we had to just over time, that's why when we talk about all of these microfilms that we were making, those things were done so that people could understand that we were serious about our craft and that we weren't just sitting on the material that we had been shooting for, you know, for years, you know, at that point. So just like DJs have to earn their credibility and eventually start getting booked and things of that nature, we had to kind of go through the process of people actually wanting to be interviewed, you know, or wanting to be a part of it and wanting to, you know, somehow figure out a way how they could get music in the film or how they could, you know, set up a screening so that they could, you know, take advantage of it. So that time, it took us a minute to get to that point to where now we have all of the guys in the film, all of them are actively involved to a certain degree.
And also like that, you had that one slide that was like, here are all these people that are working for us all around the world. Like, do you associate that with just like this movement of electronic music, this community? Like it feels different than other artistic scenes or musical scenes where there's like, I know there's obviously alluded to some competition in the film, but for the most part it feels like it's very communal, you know, like, do you think that's just people love techno, they want to hear this story? Like, why do you think, you know, there's this community or this connection?
Well, this music, and I think it's being from Detroit too, but it's connected us with people all over the world that we would have never been connected with. And so it's the music and the love for Detroit that we found in people from all over the world, from Amsterdam. When we first landed in Amsterdam, everyone was wearing Underground Resistance t-shirts. So it was just kind of a testament to how popular the music was all over the world. And it was also a testament to how they were much more informed about the true origins of this music.
Like in Europe, you mean?
Yes,
yeah.
all over the world.
Yeah, so, everywhere but here.
Yeah, and especially Detroit in America. We just found that we learned that these guys were gods overseas and kind of just regular people here at home.
They had a level of anonymity at home that they enjoyed, but now that this scene has blown up in such a way, you know, they're trying to figure out how to capitalize off of their moment in this music that seems to have has been forgotten by most people. So, you know, they're always now trying to, instead of hiding who they were, which was a part of Juan's business model.
There's like a mystique to techno and Detroit techno in general.
Yes. Because of that, now they want to be known by their names. However, prior to that, it was all these pseudonyms and names.
And I think it was Mike Huckabee it was interesting to hear him saying like, this isn't about me. Like, I don't want to be like the contrast of him being like, this is a selfless act, and then seeing like, you know, these $1 million DJs where it's all about them. It's like so focused on this. It's like essentially the complete antithesis. And it's amazing to see him giving back to the community too. You know, like, was that in Detroit, or was he? Yeah, that is. So, and I know, I guess another question I have for you is like, how does that make you feel being from Detroit and following these guys around and seeing like how differently they're treated, you know, overseas, and how, you know, there's like this, maybe not just a lack of respect, but just like lack of knowledge about who they are and how important that music scene is worldwide. Like, how does that inspire you, like, and motivate you guys to continue this project?
Yes, that's how we got here. I always, when I moved to Los Angeles, I couldn't stand listening to the radio. I thought it was horrible. What kind of DJs are these? They can't even call themselves DJs. They're like record players. And I couldn't understand for the life of me, but the music was always so inspirational to me. When I was living in Los Angeles, I started this when I was 12 years old. I would get up in the morning and I would listen to my tapes that I would record, these mix shows that I would record off the radio, and that would be my workout music since I was 12. So that didn't stop when I moved to Los Angeles. That would be my get up in the morning music. That was my morning motivation. And it was always so important. It was important to me, the music. I was a big music fan. I always wanted to do something with my city and for my city. And during the time right before we started this, I just got so tired of hearing about all these bad stories. And this was before the bankruptcy in Detroit. And I always felt like, wow, how can I do something? What can I do? And I wasn't even a filmmaker at the time. And then when I came across the Techno Museum, that's when I realized, oh, this story needs to be told. But I was also really falling in love with documentaries at the time. And I used to watch Behind the Music on VH1 all the time when I was sick and pregnant. And I thought, wow, this is like the best, anything I could watch on the TV. I mean, this was like the best form of entertainment to me. And I never thought in a million years that I would be one day making documentaries. And so it's awesome to be here. Thank you guys, DePaul. Chris, I don't mean to say thank yous early, but this is like so professional. I'm so impressed with everybody's jobs and their professionalism. We've done lots of screenings, different universities, but never have we gotten this type of treatment. And usually we're doing kind of half of what you guys are doing ourselves, even if it's at a different venue. But I just had to say that real quick. So.
Thank you. You guys deserve it, you know? I guess this is a good time to ask about like how you, because neither of you guys studied filmmaking, like how did you guys get into, like what influenced you to like tell stories visually? I guess you probably have different origin stories, but I know you both come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
What led you to filmmaking?
Man, I was studying urban policy in New York. And at the time, I went to a university called the New School for Social Research. And while I was there, it was cool. I was on like a fellowship. So it was cool, but the whole time I wanted to start my own network. Like, I want to start my own channel. And this was prior to YouTube or any of that stuff. Again, it was at a time where, I mean, you were actually using literal film. You were cutting film, or you had an Avid that was extra large, and you couldn't afford one for your home. So for years, I just shuffled tapes around HBO studios, and one day I figured if I was going to go further in this business, I needed to move to Los Angeles. And don't ask me why, because New York is a hub of this production, but moving to Los Angeles empowered me then to pick up a skill, and editing was the skill that I picked up. Mm-hmm. And I just started editing on my own, and a guy saw a skateboard video that I had put together, and he asked me did I want to edit his film, and his film was called Icons Among Us: Jazz in the Present Tense. It was a 4-hour miniseries on jazz, and boom. Now, at that point, I had become the lead editor on this film, and that's where I become a documentary filmmaker, for lack of a better, job description at that time. And just working on Icons gave me the legs and the foresight to know I wanted to make a movie on Detroit, dance music eventually. And I told Jennifer when we first started, this was early on, I was like, it's gonna take us 7 years. Because it took us 7 years to do Icons, and like at the end of Icons, they got like $500,000 from the Rums of Puerto Rico and some other sponsor. I think at the time it was the Documentary Channel, and I think the Documentary Channel gave them $50,000, and Rums of Puerto Rico gave them $450,000. So this allowed them to finance the film, but they got it in the last hours. So we were basically cutting that film, sending it straight to television, like right up until it aired. Like, so we'd finish episode 1 and literally send it in, and it would air. So it's just this kind of hardcore editing and filmmaking then just let me know I can handle the stress of sitting in a room with at the time they had 2 directors, 3 producers, and with all these
sitting
people over your shoulder, kind of like saying, oh, I want this, I want that. And then that's kind of where I developed, the editor pushback. Can't do all that. I can do this. This is what I see. And so, that's how I really just cemented my work ethic in that moment too, because I was the only editor, the lead editor, I'd be up for hours and all hours of the night, and just working in that type of workflow to hit these particular deadlines. And finally I did a show called Masters of the Mix on BET. It was our DJ battle show, reality DJ battle show, and everybody was impressed with how I could keep things on beat. Like, just seamlessly going from scenes and different things. And that was just something that I had picked up as a child or as a teenager.
Yeah, or in your musical background too, do you think that helps with editing, the linear time and
Dude, I'm literally in the room a lot of times,
Yeah, there's beat.
There's beat and keeping it on beat, and nodding my head even when there's no music, and just all these things. And that's just how I developed my skill set, and what I kind of became noticed for is that I could keep stuff flowing in such a way.
Cool. And Jennifer, what about you? What did you study? What is your background in?
I actually studied business in college, but I started working in entertainment in front of the camera. In the 90s, I did some music videos and some bit parts on some sitcoms on UPN at the time. And I just wasn't comfortable doing that, but I was taking notes during production.
Yeah. And
I really just loved music, and I wanted really to have my own label. And at the time, everybody was, at that time, having an independent label was like the thing to do. And I always, dreamed about having a Detroit label, but I would be from Los Angeles and all this. And then things changed. The music business had changed. What happened was the MP3s came out and Napster, and everything had become digital, and it really changed the landscape of the music business. And it was like an exciting time for an independent person like myself, an independent thinking person like myself. And I started a independent, one of the digital label, and we specialized in positive music. And so that was awesome, but I couldn't figure out how to make any money with it. And then I was constantly trying to figure out different ways to market music. And that's when I started to fall in love with documentaries. And I thought, this is awesome. You can, kind of sell music this way too. And then that's kind of when I fell on, I was taken to the first techno museum and came across the story, and then I felt something on the inside. I was like, wait a minute, this story needs to be told to the mainstream. And even though I wasn't a filmmaker, 10 minutes after being at that museum, I was so inspired. I run into him, and then it was like, it just kind of happened from there. So this story kind of found me and kind of fell into my lap. And I learned along the way. He knew more than I did, and I figured, well, I can work hard. I can figure it out. And I just did whatever I could to support him and what he wanted to do. And I had a vision, and I just kind of taught myself, how to do this. And I basically kind of took my skills as a mother, doing that kind of dirty work, and that's how I figured out how to produce.
Cool. Another thing I think is really admirable about your guys' approach is that you, or at least with this film, that you're so open to feedback, that you're showing in progress work, you're cutting it between screenings, and you're essentially opening it up to strangers to give you feedback, and you're taking it really seriously. How did this happen? Have you done this before, or can you talk a little bit about this process? Because it feels, at least to me, very unique. I haven't seen a lot of people come and do that, but it's probably one of the most educational things for students to see filmmakers being like, fuck, we got denied from Sundance, it sucked, and it put us in a bad spot, but we did this, and this, and yeah.
You guys, I'm glad that DePaul is on the latter end of our college tour as opposed to the beginning. And when we went to Duke this time last year, we just showed clips. I think we edited the first 3 minutes of what you saw, and then after that, everything was clips. It was a radio cut.
Yeah.
And people came and they sat through 35 minutes of just bites, right? And this kid came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Man, I can't believe there wasn't, no white people around."
In the film?
In the film at the time.
Weird.
At the time, And then he was saying, well, he said something about the terrorism of
Jim Crow.
And what is that? And that stuck with me. That let me know that I couldn't just, it's times that you let these guys talk, and you can choose to cover them or not. But then there are teachable moments. Mm-hmm. And then you have to listen to people say, hey, I didn't understand that. And so that lets us okay, that's a teachable moment. Let's actually take a second here. And the last screening we did, in D.C. at Hirshhorn, a woman came up to us and told us, she was like, that wasn't the Great Migration. I had some pictures. I tried my hardest not to, really go there and with the B-roll coverage, or even, it's a dance movie. So let's get past all this historical stuff. But then when people are making these points, you just can't flippantly talk about these moments without really giving any accurate B-roll and content.
Yeah.
So that made us have to that made me, after coming back, have to spend the night, evening going through YouTube and reading stuff, being like, okay, what is the Great Migration?
So you're being educated through the process as well, through your research, but also just, trying to improve the film, which is what you do when you get critiques and feedback. It's very positive. That's really cool. Another thing that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on is you said you had a label that you specialized in positive music. What do you mean by that? And do you guys consider techno music to be positive music?
It's funny that you asked that, because it's, at the time, this kind of genre kind of emerged. It was kind of a blend of new age and kind of religious music, or basically it was just music that had positive lyrics. And we were just, me and my brother, we started this. We built our first website, I don't know, it was like 2003, I don't know, it was a long time ago. And then we started connecting with all these positive artists all over the world. And they were, it's funny that you made the connection with the techno, because to me it was always inspirational, and it would be considered positive because it would get me up. It inspired me to get up every day and work out. So, and it didn't have the techno that we were brought up listening to. There weren't any lyrics that were suggestive. There was no mentions of any drugs. It was basically positive music. So I can still listen to the music today in my car with my kids and not feel bad about it. Unlike anything else that they play on the radio today. So yes, I do consider it positive.
And one of the gentlemen in our film, Dimitri Hagerman, who started Tresor in Berlin, he looks at it like techno music is a peace music. It's a peaceful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think have you guys seen Black to Techno? It's like
yes.
So there's a quote by him, I think, where he said, if you like techno, you're like a purveyor of peace, whether you know it or not. And,
yes.
Yeah, and like talks about how techno was the soundtrack for like the revolution in Berlin.
Yes.
And like it's amazing, and it's also like this. There aren't always lyrics in it. It's mostly like rhythmic, so it transcends language usually, right? That's maybe one of the reasons why.
Well, internationals and people outside could really tap into it, because they looked at the music as I'm learning as an international movement, that like somebody coming after the fall of the Berlin Wall. This music was something that they could kind of tap into, and it be something bigger than where they're from, and they could tap into the international wave of this sound and say, hey, I have a connection to Detroit, or I have a connection to London, and all these places where this music is kind of like coming from. And so I've really found what you guys, that question you asked, Dimitri's whole thing about this being a peace movement was something that we really kind of gravitated to as well, and that's how we see the music.
Yeah, and I also like in the Underground Resistance Manifesto, Underground Resistance is mentioned. Do they have something to do with the Techno Museum as well?
Yes.
Which was a group very influential, but very much like Public Enemy, like had this like an ethos and like a militancy to it, and their manifesto talks about how like we'll never have world peace without techno music, and how it brings people together from all nationalities, like all walks of life, all colors, all, and it really has this unifying quality to it. And so does, house music and techno. They're interchangeable in my mind, So yeah, it's a healing type of thing. And it's very, like the clip you showed of your son, like this idea that this has to be taught in schools. Like, why is it so important to you guys to pay homage to not just techno, but like Motown and like this lineage from like Jay Dilla to like through techno to Motown and further back? Why is that important to be taught to like a younger generation?
Well, I feel like before the bankruptcy happened with Detroit, I said something's got to be done. There's too many bad news pieces that I'm seeing every day, and I'm tired of it. And I started to feel like we need to tell our own stories. We need to set the record straight. Detroit needs better PR. That's all it takes, is to create a new story. And these new stories have to show the beautiful side of Detroit. And I know where that is. So that answers part of your question. What was the other part of your question?
Why is it important for, like, this might be less about teaching, but like your film
our passion, the fuel behind our passion in telling this story.
But also, like, why is it important, do you think, to understand like this lineage? Like in the beginning of the film, it's that focus on EDM, and I forgot the guy's name who you're interviewing, and he's like, most people don't even know who these originators of, let alone that it came from America and came from Detroit. Like, I guess I'm asking, like, why does that matter, like, to you guys, and how, like,
Yeah.
I know it does matter because you made a film
Let
about
me,
it.
let me jump on this right quick. It matters because this is my story. Like the guy Juan Atkins, his grandmother grew up around the block from me, right? So I've known for years that techno has come from Detroit. But you start talking to people, and they immediately say, "Oh, house," you know. Yeah, I know techno. It's called house. You know. So then you're like, okay, well, hold on. It's not house. It's actually this whole other genre. You know, it's from Detroit, and I've had this kind of conversation with people since 1989. You know, techno's from Detroit. Oh, I never heard. Not from Detroit. So, you know, it's just I really felt like this was core to who I am. Right, and telling Juan's story and the story about my neighborhood. Like I can essentially tell my story by tapping into who Juan is, you know, and that's important in an educational standpoint because now people still look at Detroit as like Hitsville or Motown, and what we're talking about is how this Detroit's kind of reputation for being a music capital didn't die with Motown and Hitsville. We're actually talking about from Hitsville to EDM that Detroit still has a presence in terms of the sonic things that we sell throughout the world, if I'm saying that correctly, the things that we market. And Detroit just, as she said, you want to figure out a way to market Detroit in a way that's counter to narrative. Techno, the story of techno is that, and you know, it was important for me to be on some team. Like I don't care what it is. When people were crewing up for Detroit stuff, I'd be like, yo, I'm down. You know, I want to work on it because I'm from Detroit. So just that in itself made it where I really felt like we had to tell a story. And we just did UCLA earlier this year. We showed them clips too. But the professor was like, I really want you guys to finish because I want to get this into our curriculum here. And so that's when we were like, okay, you know, people had been telling us that when this film comes out, it's going to be kind of the definitive story. So you guys, you're going to be in universities and stuff. So the accuracy, you have to have a level of accuracy. Like, so you are who was helping us throughout this whole process. I mean, just imagine the pressure that they put on us to be accurate, you know? So they knew, Korn and Mike, those guys at UR, they knew what we were doing was going to tap in to kind of like broader culture. So there was always kind of this pressure from them to be as accurate as we possibly can.
Cool. So I think we're gonna open up the floor for Q&A. So if you're interested in asking a question to the filmmakers, there's a microphone right over there. Anything you want to ask at all. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask, what else? What is Act 2? What should we expect from the rest of the film? What other things are you guys trying to?
We're really now going to tell the story of just how this music became techno, like through marketing and through people coming over trying to profit. These guys eventually had to crew up and like tell these business people that this is what we call our music. And that's really how, in my opinion, how we become the techno capital, is that from this chance kind of meeting between Neil Rushton and Derek May, they begin to make this album called The New Sound of Detroit Techno. But really, for that to happen, there had to be a push and pull between all these guys, and techno was just what they chose to call the music, and that's what Virgin and Neil Rushton began to market this music as techno, and soon, you know, the term and the music is throughout the world with no context of where it comes from.
Nobody seems to want to ask a question. Do you want to go up to the microphone? That way we can record it.
Oh, that way you can record?
Yeah, I think that's why we do it. I'm not sure. You could speak really loudly too, probably fine.
Hi, I'm Camille DeBose. I'm a member of the faculty here.
Camille.
So right now, Afrofuturism and the Black Fantastic is like having a moment, right? And I know there was a band, Drexcia, is that right? And they was that functioning at about the same time? And then as you guys are making this, are you at all thinking about sort of futurity and how the music of the past in Detroit is going to then impact kind of the music and the educational spaces of Detroit in the future? Is that at all one of your considerations?
I mean, I think with this film, I've been listening to this music for so long, and now most music it does come back. It does have resurgences. This is having a resurgence. I started to feel like Juan making this futuristic sound was kind of, putting him and his friends in the future. And so here we are now able to continue to enjoy it and teach our kids about it and have it fit in this space that this was sort of by design. And so that is also, I think, a definite theme that has just kind of emerged through all of this. We didn't set out, thinking about this Afrofuturism aspect of it. It just kind of resulted, and this is all new.
And then from the point of Drexcia, and the timeline that we're looking at, Drexcia will be coming in like our next installment. But the Afrofuturism that they kind of reflect, we haven't necessarily, beyond Juan's connection to early technology and him start having the techno speak dictionary, and just how him and the gentleman Rick Davis, when they created Cybertron, how they were constantly thinking about the future. And of course they were Star Trek geeks. They were guys that really were in the space and things of that nature. So they were really creating worlds, future worlds in their head to create this music that they had. And that's some of what we're telling, some of the story we're telling. But again, at that point, they were underground. So they were calling their music techno, but nobody else was. And so, just over time, the techno moniker came, and then like this whole Afrofuturism from Detroit kind of became clear to people that through this music, there's some futuristic connection, and we use Greg Tate to kind of like tap into that and tell us that really going back all the way to Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, going back to Frederick Douglass. There's always been this future-oriented aspect of how folks looked at the future or looked at their lives in the future. So we connect that to Juan and what he was doing, what he and Rick were doing. And so from that standpoint, we definitely tap into it, but we don't talk about Afrofuturism like as a term or in a moment in the film. And, that's, you know what I'm saying? Like from a standpoint, we talk about it, but we don't necessarily say, okay, that's Afrofuturism, so to say,
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope I answered your question too.
Hi, my name is Will. I live here in Chicago. I have two questions.
What up, Will?
First of all, I've seen a lot of clips of the scene and the new dance show on like YouTube, but those are all like, they have VHS tracking errors. They look like crap. They're like cutting out for like 5-10 seconds at a time. Where did you find those like really good cherry clips from the scene?
Retro video.
You ain't supposed to tell people yet.
It said
so. I know, but that's where he was supposed to figure it out. No, I'm joking.
Well, one shout out to Nat Morris. He just passed a few weeks ago, and and we didn't have access to all this at first. We knew it was on YouTube, and we didn't really know where to go for all the good stuff. And we found what we wanted initially, and then when we realized we just didn't have enough, we went back again, and he gave us a treasure trove. This guy at Retro, a treasure trove of. We didn't know this existed. Beyond the scene, these people who produced the scene were also just filming Black
events,
club life.
Yeah.
So we finally found it, and it was really made all the difference in our cut. It really filled out all the holes.
Like that was a note. We got that note after Detroit that they were like, you guys need to throw video at this. Like all these pictures are cool, but people need to see video.
Yeah, those are great. I was really happy to see those. My other question is, when you do your Chicago bit, are you going to talk about disco demolition?
Actually, I purposely am not talking about disco demolition because in the Black community, disco ain't died.
Okay. Yeah.
That on a broader surface, yeah. It died, or it ran into impact, but cats was still playing disco. Like that's what Delano was pointing out. Like from 78 to 82, this thing became progressive. So the marketing for Demolition Disco, from what happened, the bad marketing from that basically made regional cities like Detroit term it something else. Progressive, you know what I mean? Which was really just, New York Garage, which was also a kind of another name for disco. Just these other like pseudonyms came up. But man, we had it in the earlier cut for sure, and I used to be like, man, everybody got that in their film. Like everybody, I'm not gonna have it in mine. So yeah.
Fair.
But if, I guess people don't know what you guys are referring to. I don't remember. It was 1979 or
yes.
Steve Dahl, radio DJ in Chicago, held a disco demolition in what was then Comiskey Park, where people just brought disco records, but also just all kinds of R&B records, and just destroyed them and burned them.
In the middle of the field.
In the middle of the field.
It's a double header between Detroit versus Chicago.
It was that? I didn't know. Wow.
What became known as the death of disco, that's when they actually killed the genre that day.
However, there's a lot of like, it also like motivated and influenced a lot of like the early house music pioneers and DJs to
Hey man, thank you. Thank you for that question, both of them.
Hi. My name is Larissa Akinremi. I am a part of the Chicago Black Social Cultural Map. We have a digital documentary on house music from 1910 to present.
Sweet.
I really enjoyed the film. I just wanted to make one comment about your historical context, which I'm really glad you did put it in there, because you can't talk about the music without talking about the history. The music is definitely rooted from our history. And secondly, I was just wondering what your next phase is going to be. I'd like to see if you were going to add some of the other women DJs like Minx, Women on Wax. Are you going to talk about the next wave of DJs that were inspired by Juan Atkins or Delano Smith, like Three Chairs, Rick Wilhite, Marcellus Pittman?
All the greats, yeah.
Theo Parrish.
Yeah. Actually, not in this film.
Okay. And the dancers.
You bring up a note that we get often. Okay. Is like, it's like, where are the women's stories? Where are the stories about women? And Stacy was there at kind of like ground zero.
Right.
And we was trying to figure out like who else, and so it took us a minute to find like other people who were there participating in the history. Right. And for this particular film, I wanted to just keep the story about kind of this picture and these guys and this moment. And the woman who came out of that was Paris Gray.
Right.
So Paris Gray will be in Act 3.
Who's from Chicago?
Who's from Chicago, and she tells the story of how Big Fun was made and Good Life was made, and how those records, you know, she wasn't singing them like for techno. She wasn't singing them to be house. She was singing them to be pop records. So once you start adding in all these other little flavors and spices, this music becomes something else, and that's kind of she will be kind of she also explains that during this period that the culture was kind of geared toward the producer DJ. People wanted to hear what they were doing, and there weren't a lot of women, and most women who were in the scene at that particular time, they were vocalists. And she was a vocalist, and that's how she was able to come in and kind of be a part of this all-male guys club at a time when, you know, there were a few women out there, but we were just trying to use the ones that were central to the story. And Minx, hieroglyphic, is it hieroglyphic?
Right.
Yeah, those women came in generations after the period we're talking about.
Yeah. I was just talking about the next wave, those that were inspired by. I know they weren't.
Like we want to do
80s.
We want to do part 2, and part 3. Like, you know, that really you're seeing the first 42 minutes, or even in the 100, you know, in the full feature. We won't touch on those guys, but hopefully, God willing, we'll do God Said Beat Machines Part 2, and we'll start to expose more, and we'll do Part 3, and then that's where that's where the 3 Chairs and Moody and all those guys, like, but it's so many people that are part of this culture. Everybody deserves a fair chance at their story being told. That's why we went and got Blake Baxter, Santonio Eccles, Eddie Folks, the gentleman you saw in here, Daryl Shannon.
Okay.
You know, we had to go find these people. So, you know, we're just trying our best to make sure everybody gets their roses while they're here.
Okay. Thank you for answering the question.
Thank you for asking.
If you're in town tomorrow, we're doing the last segment of our Chicago Black Social Cultural Map at the Center on North Halsted, 3636 North Halsted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Hi there. My name is Michael. I grew up right here in Chicago, but I absolutely love techno music. And I had electronic music growing up as a kid. However, I really didn't expand into the techno world until I actually went to Germany when I was in my teenage years. And you hit on a lot of really good points from an international standpoint. And I was curious if you could expand on why you think the rest of the world has embraced this music when the United States has really kind of taken almost an opposite route, and it's a completely different type of music here, you know, EDM focused versus techno across the entire rest of the world.
It's funny, the EDM even here is more trappy, more hip-hoppy, you know. I would say that early on, when London stamped this music as dope, that the rest of Europe eventually bought in. And London helped make this music what it is today, you know, and Berlin as well. And Berlin, and I mentioned earlier, it's like you had people who were basically at the fall of the wall, East and Western Europe at the time. They were trying to figure out how to be a part of this bigger world. And this music was that opportunity, and it was cool. So it gave them a soundtrack in Berlin to, you know, to cultivate their scene. So I believe that just in Europe, they appreciated kind of the non-lyric, you know, it being an instrumental music. They appreciated the fact that it came from somewhere that had like a historical legacy, that they already kind of knew about, and it was easier for, I would say, just looking at it, it was easier for them to see this music for more than what it was, because of just, they didn't have, and they probably did. Well, hip hop was coming kind of at the same time. But again, it's the lyrical music. You kind of have to know the language, know the words, know what it means, what are they saying, whereas with the techno music and house music, those were feeling music, vibe music. You could just hear kind of the love and things happening. So, I think that's why it became more popular over there, if I'm answering your question correctly.
No, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing the finished product.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Any more? Yep.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Ola. First of all, thank you for all your hard work.
Thanks, Ola.
I was curious with the balance between your passion, the pressure of accuracy from academic fields, and then also this need to create money in order to sustain yourself and your project. How do you envision this going out into your audience, as a completed piece or even in clips? How do you? I was inspired by your concept of waking up to it. So, is there money in, or even just exposure, and here's a morning playlist, or talking about what techno meant for you, and then exploring those experiences for your audience. So both in the financial realm, but also then say as educational tool, how do you see it being a multimedia experience as well as just watching it?
Oh, wow, that's a big
Yeah,
question.
you even gave us some jewels right there.
Well, one thing, it wasn't easy to kind of hone in on exactly the story that you eventually see the whole thing of. But we had to kind of hone in on this kind of moment in time when techno was actually that phrase was actually coined in Detroit and from this man. There's so many stories to tell. We had to really kind of hone in for this two-dimensional piece. But really, it's the work is not just making this documentary, but the work is doing all this research. And so in doing all this research, yes, we have all this stuff, all this extra stuff that we could maybe use for, podcasts or extra videos on YouTube. You're talking about making money. It's really hard to do that. What we do more of is spend money. And so
We do that real well.
we spend money. We've made this with peanuts from our pockets. But we also have a VR project. So it's really important for us to get this story out, even beyond this two-dimensional documentary piece. And so in 2016, we got an opportunity with Tribeca to do a virtual reality project, in which we call Techno City, and where we recreate Techno Boulevard. And you can kind of, eventually, you'll be able to see those guys back in the day collaborating on music in their studios on what is really known as Gratiot Avenue. And so that's just part of it. Now, then we have a book coming out. But, you said something about why is this important to teach? And I'm sorry, I had to kind of go back, but it's important to teach because it's empowering. It's empowering to know our own stories. Growing up from Detroit, I was kind of ashamed. I really didn't know that there was anything good about being from Detroit. I grew up scared. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I was afraid to tell people I was from Detroit. I would say Michigan. And so for a long time. And so there's much more work that goes into really getting the message out about this music and where it actually comes from, and about how there is a beautiful side to Detroit. So there's so many ways, and so it's so hard to answer that question exactly.
Let me take a quick shot. And I never was ashamed I was from Detroit. I was always from the D. So, but that's just how we are. She asked her how she came. I'm older, of course. And so I have a different take on it. But as it relates to monetizing and money, it took us till this year to have conversations with people where nobody's offended that you tell them you need money. You know, it took a long time. And then the whole thing about documentary, people think documentaries are cheap, or people think documentaries don't require money. So, you know, in addition to selling the T-shirts and stuff like that, we had to get our cut to a point to where we can start having conversations with movie money people, and they be like, you know, hey, maybe we have some investment for you. So the way in which we got to a point to where now we're at the point where we're talking money. It took years to get to the point to where you're even talking money again with people who are like, when you say, I need $250,000, nobody flinches. Like, oh, that's a good number, you know? But it took forever. I remember saying to people early on, like, we need $250,000. And then like actually like laughing at me, like, what do you need that for? But now we need 3 times that, you know what I'm saying? But if we would have got the 250,000 like years ago, who knows what this thing could have been, you know? But I'm glad we didn't get it, because it made us have to grind to get to a point to where our piece now, people see the value in it, and they see that we can have a conversation about what we need to pay for clearing this music, what we need to pay for clearing that scene footage. That scene footage, Nat Morris, rest in peace, like, that's $2,000 for a minute, and you gotta do 2 minutes. You got to buy 2 minutes, so you got to spend $4,000, right, before you even do anything. So we started stretching out that video, because we gonna spend $4,000 here, and then once you add the music to it, it becomes this whole other, like, you don't even know what it's gonna cost, but you know it's gonna cost. But at the same time, you're like, that's not gonna stop my creativity, because in order to get to the money people, I need something that the money people will say, hey, I see the value in that. And it took us time. I hope I'm answering your question, but it took us time to just get to the point where our main product, because we were told about YouTube videos and monetizing off of YouTube videos a long time ago, and we had to make a decision, like, all right, are we gonna go YouTube or not YouTube? I was never for the YouTube thing. I've always been for making a film that was shown in the theater context. So we couldn't monetize off of YouTube, because you got to spend production time making those things for YouTube. And then you got to clear the music. So it's just like, let's just, focus, film, film is going to get us to the point to where people are going to pay for the film to be cleared, and we can sell this thing in perpetuity.
Are there particular venues that, like, I can envision this in, like, at Movement, or say at Detroit Art Museum as part of an installation where you have that, or even say like an art therapy workshop where you have kids who are able to mix and actually, like, explore themselves that way? What are your ideal venues for something like this?
Well, that's definitely part of our outreach and impact campaign. So teaching the kids the school stuff, museums, installations, I mean, all of that is definitely in the works. So what you all just saw was 38 minutes? 40 minutes.
46.
The entire cut is about 90 to 100 minutes.
120, right.
We're expected to premiere in the spring. So this will do the film festival route and hopefully get sold there, and we'll probably be doing that for about a year and doing other screenings like this. But I wanted to add that because I think that was part of your other question too, about what comes after this. So so we're getting ready to do all the big festivals. We're interested in all the top tiers, of course, and hopefully we can come back here next year and show the full thing.
Please do.
And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all out of time for questions, but I think I speak for everybody here when I say thank you very much for bringing your film here and showing it to us. I think we all learned a lot about
Thank you.
what you're doing, and we wish you the best of luck with the rest of the film.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris and Wendy and the students.